All right. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much to those who've joined us in person and online via Zoom. My name is Catherine Leanhard, and I'm an Energy Research Associate with Delaware Sea Grant, based out of the University of Delaware, just down the road. And I'm so excited for our conversation tonight. We've got three great panelists with us here. I first just want to thank the Lewes Public Library for co-hosting this event, Jessie in the back for all of her support, also for my fellow Sea Grant colleagues who have helped make this happen, and for Fred and Linda Dilla and Colin Norman, who host the Science and Society series and have helped make this happen. So thanks so much for joining us. A quick review of the Zoom webinar functions for those online. You can use the Q&A function to ask questions throughout the webinar, and we'll address those in the panel discussion towards the end. You are automatically muted to prevent any disruptions. You can select closed captioning if you need it. And the chat function is available to report any technical issues to the host. And the webinar is being recorded. And before I get into the content, I wanted to introduce the Delaware Sea Grant College program in case you aren't familiar with us. We're one of 34 federal university partnerships across the U.S. and its territories, and we use science to support coastal communities and economies through research, extension, and education. Our program areas include aquaculture, fisheries and seafood, coastal hazards, coastal resource management, sustainable coastal communities, and healthy environment. And I should mention that related to energy, we are not an advocacy organization, so my role with Sea Grant is exclusively to be a liaison of the best available science. And so that's what we're hoping to do tonight. You can learn more about our work and how to get involved by visiting decgrant.org. And before I introduced our guest panelists, I just wanted to give a quick little 101 into some energy and electricity things so that we can all start from the same baseline. And perhaps since you are here, you're interested in discussing electricity and energy, but why discuss it at all? Why is it relevant for Delaware? I like to start with the fact that Delaware imports about 60% of the electricity it uses. This map is from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, and they compile data from all across the U.S. on generation, consumption, movement of electricity across states. And this map here shows data from 2019, so it's a bit dated, but it's shaded in accordance with states whether they have a net import or net export of electricity. So basically, are they generating more or consuming more compared to what they make? And so if you'll take a look in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that Delaware ranks just third to last among highest share imported. So again, it's close to 60%. It might even be above that as of this year. But I like to highlight that and kind of frame the conversation, knowing that we are a net importer. And so we're importing electricity. Where does it come from? Well, Delaware is a part of a regional electric grid, and our regional grid operator is called PJM Interconnection, and they're responsible for overseeing the flow of electricity between all or parts of the 13 states that you see here on the map and the District of Columbia. So their service territory is pretty large. PJM is not a utility, so they're not generating the electricity, but rather they have responsibility to maintain flow so that we all have the power that we need when we need it. They also administer competitive wholesale markets, so they plan in advance for what electricity might be needed, and they conduct long-range planning for reliability. And that word reliability can be kind of difficult to define, but I like the definition that comes from the U.S. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They say that grid reliability is the provision of an adequate, secure, and stable flow of electricity as consumers may need it. So essentially, when you flip the light switch, it turns on. And FERC kind of defines reliability as having two components. The first being reliable operation. So a power grid can withstand a sudden disturbance that can lead to blackouts. For example, an extreme weather event that might cause stress to the electric grid. And the second component being resource adequacy. So making sure that there's enough generation in the grid to meet our projected demand. And I think it's this second component of resource adequacy that we'll be kind of talking about this evening. But I just kind of wanted to define reliability to give some context. And while we do import about 60% of our electricity from surrounding states, we do generate the rest of the 40% in state. And most of that comes from natural gas. So this data is from 2022. So again, not the most recent, but it displays how much of the electric power industry uses different sources of energy to generate electricity. And I believe for last year, it's over 90%. But as you can see, the majority does come from natural gas and less than 10% from other sources. You're probably aware that in the past, coal-fired power plants were a really prominent technology in Delaware, but those have been phased out in recent years due to retirements and long age. And with that, I am excited to introduce our panelists. So we're going to move through just 3 brief introductions, presentations from our panelists, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion. So first, I'd like to introduce Drew Slater. Drew Slater was named the Executive Director Selectee for the Sustainable Energy Utility, otherwise known as Energize Delaware, on February 20th, 2023. The mission of Energize Delaware is to inspire sustainable energy solutions for a thriving environment and economy with a vision of powering tomorrow with a clean, efficient, and affordable energy. Energize Delaware has more than 20 programs, including its flagship Home Performance with Energy Star. Prior to this position, Drew was appointed by Governor Carney as Delaware's public advocate before the State Public Service Commission, PJM, and was the vice president of the National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates. Drew graduated from Washington College and received a master's degree from Wilmington University in 2011. Thanks, Drew, for being here. I'll save the other introductions for when the panelists come forward, but I'll pass it over to you to give a brief introduction to Energize Delaware and how Energize Delaware, yep, you can bring that over.
Good evening. I don't know. I think so. I'm Drew Slater. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation. I enjoy coming to Lewes. We actually put solar on the building and helped fund not only this building, but another adjacent building at Lewes. So it's always great to come back here. So the topic that I'm really going to talk about is how energy resources could increase or decrease prices. So we all know that affordability is top of mind. We've seen our utility bills increase. We just went through the coldest snap in 20 years, where I think it didn't get above freezing for like 10 days in a row. And I think the snow just melted from 3 weeks ago. So in trying to prepare for this conversation, it's very heavy. It gets very in the weeds, and I'm not going to do that, or somebody needs to tell me to stop. But I think we need to understand kind of how we got here first when we talk about pricing and affordability. So the PJM's regional grid, so you saw that. Capacity prices, so there's different auctions at PJM, but capacity prices, so being able to be available to run when called upon, were about $30 3 years ago. Actually, it was less than $30, and I think it's $3.70 now. It's at the $3.30 something. And that's the price collar. So there's like a cost cap on PJM and the prices that you will pay. So to think about the fact that it has 10x'd in the last 3 years, and so that all of that cost is then paid for by customers. There's a variety of reasons for it, so I won't bore you with all of that, but just know that we haven't been able to get generation up and running and through the PJM queue fast enough, and those that have gotten through the queue for many different reasons have not actually gotten built. And so 5 years ago or so, We talked about there was 40 gigawatts outside of the PJM queue. I think 90% of it was renewables, and they weren't getting built, either siting or permitting or other barriers. So trying to find ways to get that generation through the queue. And then the other factor, which we've heard a lot about, is data centers. So in the last PJM auction, according to the PJM Independent Market Monitor, data centers were 40% of the cost of the entire capacity auction, which was $6.5 billion. That's what is currently existing, not what we're going to potentially see in the future. And I was thinking, I could just answer this in a really easy economic way and say supply and demand, but it's just so much more complicated than just supply and demand. You have commodity prices, so the price of natural gas actually matters here. You saw that 90% of our generation is natural gas. It's a majority of what's in PJM. The commodity price actually matters a great deal. When it goes up to $7.50 on January 28th, that flows to customers. In the last 3 years, the natural gas price has increased over 35%. And even some of my own staff, when I start talking about regional, national, or international policies, it's hard to grasp how all of those can affect us. So when we talk about LNG exports and how we're the largest LNG exporter in the world, LNG is now there was an article this morning about it. It consumes more than all the residential or commercial properties in the entire country. And that's just what we export. And so the more LNG that we export, the less that we have for ourselves, so the price kind of goes up. It actually would be the third highest consumer behind industry and power sources. And so that would be LNG exports. And why all that matters is because we have to pay the natural gas prices. And so we look at the Henry Hub price in Louisiana. I talked a minute about the PJM price collar. I know Senator Huxtable is here. I think that is the single biggest difference that you can make on prices that you'll probably see this year. Because if you did not have the cost cap with PJM, it would inevitably go higher, right? And that all flows back to us. So like I said, it used to be about $30. It's $3.30 something now. So that would all flow right back to us. And that is a huge driver for our utility bills. And that's on the supply side of the bill. And then, of course, we have issues such as just the cost of supplies, how long it takes to get all of the goods and services. I don't remember how long it takes to get a natural gas turbine now. There you go. 5 to 7 years. It takes 5 to 7 years to get a natural gas turbine. So if we wanted to build it, it's going to take a pretty considerable amount of time. And so really the question to me, not a cop-out, I'm really actually trying to answer it, but really the question to me is, how do you get more resources online faster? So while we look at clean energy resources, and that's primarily what we fund along with energy efficiency, the quickest thing that we can do to get online are actually renewables. Solar is the fastest thing that we can get online. There's just really no question about it. Even within PJM or even nationally, affordability is not singularly a Delaware issue. It's not even a PJM issue. It's a national issue on energy prices. It was a national issue in the last presidential campaign. So you knew that it was a big deal, across the country. So how can you get those online faster? Um, my big concern is that what you read or hear on the news can be persuasive against renewables and not get them online in a fast enough time. For instance, our residential solar program has added about 5 to 8 megawatts just in Delaware over the last about 8 or 9 years, right? That's all beneficial. It's behind the meter, but we're also now starting to talk about batteries, and so we have funded up to $6 million for the utilities to invest in batteries so that we can have lessons learned, so that we can look at peak shaving and solar saturation and ways to actually keep to use it as backup generation for renewables. Because when we talked about the capacity auction, there's also an energy, a day ahead energy market at PJM, which is typically where renewables fit into. But when you just look at supply and demand economics, if we don't have enough generation, then the price is going to go higher. And so it really comes back to how do we get enough generation online? In the state, there's obviously been a lot of discussions about different generation, whether it's offshore wind, or I know that Indian River was an article earlier this week, and I'm happy to talk about either one of those. But there's a lot of challenges to get generation online, even within just PJM itself. The faster that we could build it, well, if I can't build a combined cycle turbine, then, and it's going to take me 5 or 7 years, that's the length of time that I'm going to see these higher prices. And I was able to sit in on the nuclear task force where they talked about nuclear energy and SMRs. And again, it comes back to what is the length of time for that? And so the best answer would be that more generation would lower prices because we would have more supply. There's absolutely the risk of the reserve margin at PJM, which is what they're talking about right now. It's not high enough for what they want. I think this winter, a couple weeks ago, I think we just had the highest winter peak ever. And that beats last year, which was the highest peak ever. And so as we continue to see these long duration weather events, we need to have more generation online. And the simplest answer is find ways to get it online quickly, to give certainty to generators, to make sure that the capacity auction is a 3-year auction and not 1 year, or that the interconnection queue isn't paused for a couple of years to correct it and make adjustments. So the short answer, very long answer to a short question is there's definitely things that can lower prices, but what we're currently looking at is perhaps not going to lower it all that much. You need really kind of wholesale looks and changes. And it really has to start with PJM because a lot of the generators are participating in the auction itself. And so we need to make sure that all the stakeholders are engaged with PJM. As the former public advocate, we actually had a vote at PJM. It is probably the most complex place to go and topic to discuss. I wouldn't even begin to call myself an expert on PJM, and I've talked about it and voted for the last 6 of the last 9 years. So we need to get as many resources online as possible. We ourselves are actually fuel agnostic in statute, but we often say the cheapest, cleanest energy is the energy that we don't consume at all. So that is going through energy efficiency. That's all of the programs that we run. We have a lot of energy efficiency for residential and commercial properties. We had a farm last week who is going to save $114,000 on one chicken house because they went through our energy efficiency program. So the cheapest and cleanest thing that you can do for yourselves, or that businesses can do, is we have to use energy efficiency measures to lower our own load and demand. Because I think that the prices are here to stay for a while until we actually clean up the backlog at PJM, which should be cleared, and then get more resources online. We've had community solar in Delaware since 2021. We're starting to see those projects come online finally. But we need to look at all the resources above. And in the meantime, my best suggestion is that we look at how do we reduce our own demand, because the cheapest, cleanest energy is the energy that we don't consume at all. Thank you.
Thanks, Drew. And I'm already getting some ideas for questions. I should have mentioned to folks that are here in person, there are note cards and pens on your chair. When we open it up for discussion after all of the introductions, you'll be welcome to either raise your hand and ask a question verbally or write it on the note card if you're more comfortable with that, and we'll come around and collect them. But thanks again, Drew. Now I'm excited to introduce Robert. Robert DeKnight was named Vice President of Nuclear Engineering in November 2024. In his capacity, Mr. DeKnight oversees the safe and reliable operations of the Hope Creek and Salem nuclear generating stations, which comprise the fourth largest commercial nuclear generating facility in the country. He also oversees the growth and development projects for nuclear generating stations, including the subsequent license renewal projects. Prior to his position, he served as the Vice President of both Hope Creek Generating Station and Nuclear Operations Support at PSEG. He has over 35 years' experience in the nuclear industry. Welcome, Robert, and come on up.
Thank you. All right, great. All right, well, Drew started us off with the affordability question. I'm going to jump in with both feet. So I'm going to just go through and describe just a little bit on what's happening in the market right now. So you just heard my background. I do work at the nuclear generating stations in New Jersey. There are two large lines that go from those power stations over to Delaware. And I am a Delaware resident. So let me just start off by saying that I can commiserate associated with electricity bills, and I have to explain to my parents why theirs are going up in New Jersey. So let's just talk a little bit about the market. Drew went through and talked a little bit about what's driving the market today. And the cheapest way to produce power in the PJM market, it's a deregulated market. Let me start by saying this. PJM is a deregulated market, so that means it's a free market, unlike the regulated markets in the majority of the country. Regulated markets can set an energy policy, whether it's a distribution and diverse mix of generation. They have utilities go out and build that particular type of generation, and then they get a guaranteed rate of return on it. That's how a regulated market works. We're in a deregulated market, deregulated back in the 2000 time frame, and really that means it's a merchant market, and people that can bid into the market at energy prices, and the lowest bid gets told that you can supply power into the market. It's the easiest way to describe this. The however is, now you're at the mercy of whatever the market is producing, right? So unlike a regulated market that can maintain market prices flat, in our market, we're subject to what's driving the price of electricity. It's natural gas is the lowest cost producer that bids into the market, and that sets the market price. So when you hear Drew talk about $1,000 a megawatt hour prices last, about a week and a half ago, I think is when it peaked. I've never seen those before. And And really what's driving that is an open market, people bidding into the market based on demand. And natural gas really sets those prices. And we've seen natural gas prices go up 40%. To offset this, when you have too low of a capacity in your market, the market set up something called the capacity market. Capacity market was supposed to reward individuals and people that if you bid into the market, we're going to put on their capacity pricing that will incentivize individuals to go build additional capacity, and you get that payment up front to be able to build capacity. Here's the flaw. Did everyone just hear how long it takes to get a turbine? Transformers about the same. Building a cogen plant's going to take about 5 years. Solar, you can get on faster, but you still need transformers and inverters. So it's about a 4-year horizon. You're getting it from places like South Korea and Spain. And the capacity market is a 3-year look ahead. So individuals are not going to put their companies at risk for a 3-year look ahead when it takes 5 years to go build something, whether it's offshore wind, solar farms, nuclear plants, or cogen plants. So because of that, the capacity prices are spiking. And because Governor Shapiro sued the PJM to cap it, read an article yesterday, actually, that cap's going to stay in place the next 2 years. So that's good news for all of us and our bills, because that was the main driver. And the transmission and distribution cost, which we pay to Delmarva, that's gone up roughly the rate of inflation, probably a little bit more than that. Delaware, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but Delaware is a net importer. So is New Jersey. So Delaware is about 1 gig of power that it imports from elsewhere. New Jersey's importing about 4 gigawatts of power. Maryland, you saw it was a net importer. So when you start looking around at the PJM grid that Catherine threw up there, there's not many other states left. You got Pennsylvania and Ohio, a little bit in Virginia. They're a little bit of a hybrid within PJM. So the bottom line is we're going to be importing from Pennsylvania. And where are they building data centers right now? Pennsylvania and Virginia. The two net exporters of power are building data centers, and that power now is being consumed within their states, which means it's harder for us to import, and that's going to drive those capacity prices up. That's why our bills are going up, right? There's also a bit of policy getting in front of production, and this is what I mean by that. Any administration, no matter which side of the aisle that you sit on, you can drive policy, and if plants get shut down, you can do that overnight, right? You can shut generation down, whether it's coal plants, offshore wind, whatever policy was being driven by either side of the aisle. I tried calling offshore wind just with making sure I'm balanced up here. But you can do that overnight in a single administration, right? What is hard to do when you look at offshore wind, or even now with what we're hearing about nuclear power, it's hard to build that within an administration time frame, right? So that's the biggest challenge that we have, and I think policy got in front of production. And because of that, you saw the retirement of various plants that's now causing a net loss in capacity on the market. Now, this is what it looks like moving forward. You saw a decline in capacity. So the graph over on the left is going to be what the market is demanding. And you see that relatively flat, somewhat of a decline. That's because of energy efficiency that was going on within our area. And just again, as Drew mentioned, the cheapest energy is one that you save, right? And that's what we saw for years. Now with data centers, electrification of cars, and a number of other things, we're projecting growth in the grid. And the energy mix of the prediction, you can see, is a balance between renewables and gas. Coal's going away, nuclear staying flat, solar and wind are coming up, and then really it's being offset, most of it, by natural gas right now. Let's talk about nuclear for a second. I'm not up here advocating nuclear power. I believe in a diverse mix of power. So I do work in the nuclear field, so you can ask me any question that you want about nuclear power, and most likely I can answer it. About 20%, just under 20% of our electricity in the country right now is supplied by nuclear. It's 24/7, 365. We put the fuel in. The units run either for 18 months or 24 months, depending on the type of unit that it is. But that fuel is going to be in there for that period of time, and it's going to run at 100% power, base load, throughout that period. The units also run around a 93% capacity factor. That's nationwide. 93%. Our unit was about 94%. And that's going to be there. When you look back at natural gas, and I was here for the last polar vortex, I think I was operations director, so I got this thrown upon me. Here's what happened during that time, because we were getting really close to having rolling brownouts in our area, both New Jersey and Delaware. And what happened was natural gas plants, the demand was so high that the gas pipeline pressures, because nobody wants extra pipelines, the pipeline pressures dropped and couldn't supply the power plants. Coal piles supplying coal plants couldn't get fired up because they froze. And the coal piles were frozen in place, right? Solar and wind, not a major component in the supply here. The nuclear plants weren't affected by it. We were just running, and we were in emergency load management is what the actions were. And because of that base load power, we were able to keep the grid stable, and we didn't have blackouts at the time when we all needed power to be able to supply the heat for our homes, right? That would have been catastrophic. Now, new nuclear, we're hearing a lot about this in the news right now. I'll kind of walk through some of the benefits associated with new nuclear. And really, nuclear builds in this country have not progressed since about the 3 Mile Island accident, like time frame. The builds were really stopped in the early 1980s, and the Vogtle units down in Georgia, Vogtle units 3 and 4, are the only two to have been completed since that period of time. Now, what a nuclear plant gets you? Decarbonization. There's no emissions associated with the plants. It's going to be base load electricity. It's going to be a common supply. Very predictable power prices associated with our fuel, labor supply. And the benefit associated with it, and I have this here, is when you take a look at things like solar and wind, the amount of power that a nuclear plant could provide, whether it's a small modular reactor at about 300 megawatts or a large light water reactor at around 1,100 to 1,200 megawatts, you can fit that onto a small property, right? Small property. When you take a look at things like offshore wind and solar, you need about 50 square miles to be able to equal the capacity of one nuclear plant. So like one of our counties would start becoming solar if we tried, only using solar. That's why I'm a proponent of a mix of power. You need solar, you need wind, you need baseload energy. I'll go to this. The benefit associated with it, I have 3 sons, they're in their 20s right now, and I tried talking all 3 of them into going into the trades. Everyone tells them, go to college, get a degree, go be a lawyer, go be a doctor. That's great. If they want to go do that, I'll pay for it. Let them go to college. I tried talking all 3 of them into going into a trades. None of them took me up on it yet. I'm holding out hope on one of them. But whether we're building cogen plants or a nuclear plant, it's a real boost to the local economy. You're going to get about 18,000 union jobs, craft labor. That can be a traveling workforce, whether it's in our area, upstate New York, or other areas in the country. But it'll really develop that trade workforce that I think we're missing in our area of the country. We have a hard time every refueling outage to make sure that we get enough pipe fitters and electricians to be able to come in to do the work when we have a maintenance window after that 18 to 24 months that I was talking about. We also add about $64 billion to the economy nationwide, and we pay about $11 billion in state and local taxes. And we're going through a tax reassessment right now, and I can assure you we're paying our fair share. The last is about 70,000 long-term jobs. We have 1,200 people on site. We've got a security force over there, and it's good jobs for the economy and folks in the area. I do just want to mention what's out there, because again, you hear a lot of conversation right now on the news about small modular reactors. You may be hearing things like a 10-pack, and what's a 10-pack? So let's talk about the first generation Gen 1 type plants. That is, they were the test reactors. They were the small reactors that got built in the 60s and 70s. That then went to the Gen 2 plants. That's what most of the nuclear plants are in this country. They're large light water reactors, either pressurized or boiling water reactors. Salem and Hope Creek are two different designs, one from General Electric, two of them are from Westinghouse plants. Gen 3 are large light water reactors. That's what just got built down in Georgia. So when you hear a 10-pack coming out of the current administration, federal administration, they want to build 10 AP1000s, a Westinghouse designed large light water reactor. The benefit of those, a lot of passive systems, a lot of the learnings that we've had over the last 40 years have been built into those plants. So not a lot of active components, not a lot of things that require power to be able to safely shut down the reactor. And it's a much improved design. And the Vogel units have been running great down in Georgia. The site vice president is somebody I used to work with, so we keep in touch. And it's a good unit. The next one, let's talk about SMRs. They're just smaller, large light water reactors. It's the best way to describe them. So GE has something called a BWRX 300. It's a small boiling water reactor. And then Westinghouse is an AP 300. Advanced modular reactors, the last one, are really what you're hearing about in the news. That's the TerraPower. They're the newer designs, seen as a different type of coolant. So instead of water as a coolant, it may be a molten salt or high temperature gas type reactor. And those type of reactors haven't been built. So somebody's going to have to fund that and then get those reactors built so we can really go through and see what the benefit is. But both small modular reactors and advanced modular reactors, both of those are much, I'll say, safer from the standpoint of this. The older generation plants, we have an emergency evacuation zone of 50 miles. The small modular reactors, advanced modular reactors, it's the fence line of the site, right? So it's a much safer profile and something that, across the industry we're taking a look at. The large light water reactors, cheaper to build on per megawatt basis in comparison to the smaller reactors, but the smaller reactors cost less. So people like Amazon and Microsoft, Meta, they're willing to invest in a small modular reactor because it's $5 to $7 billion instead of $15 billion for a 1.1, gigawatt type reactor, right? So it's half the price for about a quarter of the power, but they're willing to put that money up. And that's where it's coming from TerraPower. These are some of the players that are in the market. And I won't go through all of them, but I mentioned a couple of the names right now. The Gen 4 type reactors, TerraPower, Kairos Power, X Energy are the ones that have a lot of announcements going on, and in the middle with the Gen 3 Plus, GE with the BWRX 300 up in Canada is making the biggest headway right now. That's all that I had. This is the overnight cost of capital, but I'm not going to kill you with all the numbers. They're big numbers, and it's going to require team effort as well as government support really to get new nuclear moving. And I think that's what you're seeing coming out of the Department of Energy and Commerce right now. So back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate the industry perspective. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Tom Noyes. Tom serves as the administrator of the Delaware State Energy Office, located within the DENREC Division of Climate, Coastal, and Energy, with responsibility for energy policies and programs. He leads the State Energy Office team to provide the policy leadership and program administration to help guide Delaware through the energy transition, including renewable energy, energy efficiency, energy security, regional planning, and resource adequacy. Tom has served the state of Delaware for nearly 20 years, previously working as a principal planner for energy policy. He has led and served on working groups related to energy efficiency, renewable energy credit markets, and the policy team which wrote Delaware's 2024 to 2028 state energy plan. Thanks, Tom. Come on up when you're ready.
And I just go like that. Advance, yeah. All right. DENREC State Energy Office. What do? We do renewable energy. We do, and if you want, we've got a few brochures. If you're interested in solar on your home or business, we can help you with that. We do energy efficiency. We can help you on that. We have an energy efficiency investment fund. It's one of the few places in state government where a business owner can go to lower the cost of doing business in Delaware. We're very proud of that program. Also want to mention energy justice, and one of our programs, long-standing programs that addresses the needs of energy-burdened households and communities is the Weatherization Assistance Program. We can help you with that. We also work on grid modernization. All of these changes that we've been talking about require a grid to accommodate them. We work on energy security. This is very much behind the scenes, but when the grid gets stressed because of weather or some other event, we've worked on the plan on what to do and how to mitigate those risks and respond to those risks. We very much base our work on an ethos of stakeholder engagement. We've got an Energy Efficiency Advisory Council, a Renewable Energy Task Force. We've got, we staff the Governor's Energy Advisory Council. We show up regularly. I'm a regular panelist on Senator Stephanie Hanson's energy stakeholder group. And I'm probably missing something, but we do this all the time. It's how we do business. And so policy planning is a group effort. Policy works when all significant stakeholders have had a chance to weigh in. And finally, I want to mention multi-state collaborations. When you talk about the regional grid, you talk about the transmission grid, the markets that serve electricity, the stresses that we're looking at in terms of rapid load growth. Load is demand. That's a sort of a technical term. Load growth is demand growth. And as that is outstripping supply, it puts stresses on the grid. We're working with fellow states. That capacity collar that you mentioned, that came out of a group of PJM governors that we help staff. And and when you talk about planning for big plans require big, you got to reach out and work with people on that. We produced a year ago, came out with a 2024-2028 state energy plan. A lot has happened since then, but most of the tools that we're talking about in terms of responding to the needs of the moment are contained in that plan. Energy justice, I mentioned, renewable energy and clean technologies, adding new clean energy to the grid. Energy efficiency and beneficial electrification, grid modernization, workforce development. I'm going to jump ahead. We also, this year, our colleagues in the climate section came out with the latest version of our Delaware Climate Action Plan. Now, the climate plan and the energy plan are not the same thing. There's an overlap, but there's a lot in the climate plan that doesn't really reach or touch the energy plan. And there's a lot in the energy plan that doesn't really directly impact climate. But there's an important overlap, and all of the key tools that are part of our policy portfolio, clean energy, energy efficiency and demand response, more efficient buildings, all of those key components are fit within, think of a Venn diagram. All of that's right there in the middle of that Venn diagram. I want to take a moment. I know it's easy to throw a lot of facts and figures out of here, but this is this single slide, which comes from PJM, tells you a lot about our electricity needs, summer and winter. Summer, the peak load is the green bar. It's about 2,700 megawatts. Winter peak load is more like 2,400 megawatts. Air conditioning draws more from the grid than heating. And they're growing faster than they used to, as was just pointed out. But when we look at the needs of the state, these are important numbers to keep in mind. 2,400 megawatts is about what we drew when it got really cold last month. So in terms of resource adequacy and affordability, there are key tools that we have to work with. Solar, rooftop and community solar. There are some utility scale, like 30, 40, 50 megawatt solar projects, either online or coming online. But most of the solar in Delaware is smaller scale. Community solar is 1 to 4 megawatts, and rooftop is generally about 8, 10, 12 kilowatts. We have more than 10,000 solar installations in Delaware. And those solar installations, by the way, add up to more than the 1% that you saw from the EIA, because they're not even visible to the federal government, because that power doesn't really feed the grid so much as it reduces the amount of energy we need to draw from the grid. So that's a tremendous resource, not only for the property owner, the household, or the business, but it's part of how we can make ourselves more self-sufficient. And by the way, when we talk about relying on the grid for more than half of the electricity we use, really, if you think of one way to think about it is most of the power on the grid that we use comes in either over those power lines or over gas transmission lines, because we don't extract any gas in Delaware. So that solar is essentially the largest resource, even at just 3.5% or so, the largest resource in Delaware that doesn't require bringing in power or gas from out of state. Other new generation we've talked about. How can we bring new generation to, and it's expensive because if you want to build new gas, gas generation in Delaware, you are likely to require gas pipelines. Those are expensive. By the way, I'll just say this right now, the coal plant, I want to get right to that rather than wait for somebody to ask. The Indian River coal plant was not shut down by state government. It was shut down because its owner, NRG, was not making money. It was inefficient, and by the way, and we are working with the owner, NRG. We are having conversations with them about what they do next. It's their decision, not ours, but we want to support NRG in making sound decisions that serve the needs of the people of Delaware. And of course, when you talk about other new generation, you have to talk about offshore wind. Governor Meyer 4 weeks ago mentioned, wouldn't it be nice? Imagine if we had 1,700 megawatts of offshore wind pouring power into the grid in January when we needed that power the most. And offshore wind it's not a 93 or 4 or 5% capacity factor, but one of the projects up in New England performed at a 52% capacity factor last month when that power was needed up there. Offshore wind is the capacity, the production in the winter is a bit stronger than it is in the summer, which makes it a nice fit, by the way, with solar, which produces more in the summer. Another resource that we're looking at and working on is storage. And there are two kinds that we're looking at. One is grid connected and behind the meter. Behind the meter could be if you've got a small solar project or other localized generation, or you've got a large campus and you want to make sure that your campus, like a hospital or school, stays up and running. Storage can be a solution for that. On the grid, storage, I've heard this a few times recently. Storage is like bacon. It goes with everything. And so whether it's your soup or your salad or your bacon cheeseburger, with solar, it extends the capacity, the contribution to the need of the grid, so that solar generated in the middle of the day in the summer can be stored for 2, 3, 4 hours to meet the peak load in the evening time. Demand response and dispatchable load is not quite the same as energy efficiency. Energy efficiency just sort of lowers the overall use, the number of kilowatt hours that you use during a day. But the highest prices we pay, particularly summer evenings and winter mornings, when we're really stressed by the weather, what's happening is the price of electricity at that hour is much higher than it usually is. And demand response that reduces the peak load during that time when instead of $10 a megawatt hour, which is 10 cents a kilowatt hour, it goes to $100, $200, $300, $400, $500, $600, $700, $800 a megawatt hour. Just, it comes back down again, God, thank God. But if we can reduce the need for electricity during that peak moment, that peak hour, it benefits the particular customer and it benefits us all as a whole. I'm going to leave it at that. I do want to, I did have one thing. Solar. We have, our RPS calls for 10% solar by 2035. We think we're ahead of schedule if everything that's in the works can come online, which is great because we need the power. But if we did a calculation, not all of that solar is going on farmland. I'm talking about 10,000 plus solar installations, rooftops, poultry houses, commercial buildings. But if all of the solar we needed to get to that 10% went on farmland, it would still be less than 1% of our farmland. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. With that, I'm going to put this down, and we can get to the conversation.
Thank you, Tom. All right, a lot to think about. 3 different perspectives from different sectors in energy, and I invited each of you on purpose because you bring different perspectives, so thank you for sharing. All right, we're right on schedule. So at this time, I'm going to ask if you would like to submit questions in person by card, feel free to write them down. Otherwise, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll have Chris Patrone here running the microphone, and we'll also be monitoring questions on Zoom. So if you do write something on the card, feel free to hold it up, and we'll come grab it from you.
My question is, since solar is the fastest path to production, where do we stand on legislation to force new commercial buildings to get solar? Because you drive up and down Route 1, you see rooftops. You don't see rooftops with solar. Then the second question is, why not put solar right down the middle lane of Route 1?
Yeah. So Tom's going to take the second part of that. My only comment on the second part is I spent 4.5 years in South Korea. I went to high school there, and they've actually done that, right? The thing that frustrates me every time I go by like Christiana Mall is the fact that there's not a solar canopy in sight. We actually built one at our office to see how it worked. There's batteries in the pedestal. There's 72 kilowatt hour batteries, and we connected 4 EV chargers. In total, we have 6 EV chargers. They're used constantly, right? On commercial buildings, I think that we obviously play a role there. Of our entire loan portfolio, about half is actually family farms. So it's solar, it's energy efficiency, but on solar, in the last 2 years, we've done about $12 million of loans on family farms, essentially netting out their energy usage. And if you know anything about a poultry house, netting out the energy usage of a poultry house is extraordinary. It also increases their operating budget because it takes away that operating cost. We also run programs like property assessed clean energy financing, which is part of a tax assessment. It's a property tax assessment where they can do clean energy and renewable energy. We're getting ready to talk about what we could do on school buildings and the energy savings we think we could attract on school buildings. But we're doing a lot in the commercial space. It really just, it takes another interested party, another business that actually wants to move forward. We've done about, I think it's $6.5 million in Laurel, $7.5 million in Milford, and $10 million in Wilmington in the last 2 years.
First of all, on the commercial buildings, I think it's 50,000 square feet. There's now a requirement that a building like that has to be capable of putting solar panels on the roof, but state law does not direct property owners to install solar. So that's that one thing. Second, we are getting underway so far in the first decade or so of the RPS requirement. We've just sort of opened it up and sort of said, who wants to build solar, and see where the demand comes from, the interest comes from. We're now doing a much more detailed, we're getting started right now, a solar market potential study that maps out where all the opportunities are. And that's going to be very interesting. It could identify lots of parking lots, for instance. Finally, on down the middle of Route 1, the thing, we have been working with DelDOT on how to they've been doing a study on where the best opportunities are. We've been working with them on that study, and we're working with them on how to fund a pilot project, at least one. So yeah, I drive up and down Route 1 too.
Yeah, you mentioned just really briefly about data centers, and it's a very hot topic. The amount of energy they use and consume is huge. Where is the energy going to come to feed the data centers with all the other stuff going on? I mean, solar doesn't really do it. Where do data centers fit in terms of the energy usage going forward, and how to fund it, how to handle it?
There, you're looking at a really challenging prospect here. Remember, I had the chart of peak load, summertime, 2,700 megawatts. There's one project proposed in northern Delaware for 1,200 megawatts. There are others, a series of others that total probably another 1,200 megawatts. Something's got to give. And so state government is working on this in several respects. One, there's legislation that's being proposed on how to manage that. There is a docket in front, a docket is a case, a docket in front of the Public Service Commission on a special new rate class for really large load customers. We have been working with our other PJM governors and our other state agencies with their counterparts within PJM on what kind of policies can be implemented at the regional basis to provide an orderly market for keeping a balance between demand and supply. There's a lot of work to do here. And a lot of people are spending a lot of brain cells trying to figure out how to make this work. I want to say that in doing so, the policy perspective is, of course, Delaware, like every other state, wants to attract new economic development, particularly high tech. But like just about every other state, we don't want that to come at the expense of everyone else's electric bills.
Sorry, are there any questions on Zoom? I want to make sure we can.
Yeah, I have a couple from Zoom. Yep.
Great.
Let's go to this gentleman, and then we'll do one as I walk through the other room.
Regarding those last couple of points, the gentleman up here mentioned solar power, and you just mentioned data centers in response to this gentleman. I have two comments about this. Solar power could be implemented tomorrow if we did something like, and I just saw a bunch of articles over the weekend about this. 24 states in this country are now looking at what are called balcony solar panels, something that's like plug and play. You buy it, you plug it into your system, it supplements the energy. That would help, it seems like, reduce the charge, our own electric bills, and reduce the demand on the grid. It won't be anywhere sufficient to meet the needs of data centers. with all of the questions, all of the concerns about is, why isn't there a moratorium on any further action on data centers until these issues are resolved or addressed? It's like this freight train moving down the tracks, and they're building the tracks in front of this thing. How are we doing this? How are we allowing these things to be considered when we don't have the electricity for them?
Two quick answers. First of all, there are energy experts who are working with key legislators on balcony solar legislation, sort of plug in. And this is, as you say, it'll be a small piece, but every piece can have meaning. In terms of a moratorium, while, and this is just for Delmarva Power because this is the Public Service Commission, while this docket is open, there is a moratorium now on connecting a large load and what that looks like, whether it's 25 megawatts or 100 megawatts. 100 megawatts would be the biggest electric customer that in the state of Delaware. The refinery is less. In Delaware City, the refinery is less than 100 megawatts. There are also legislators who are working on legislation from various perspectives on data centers, and I would encourage you to make your views known to your legislators.
All right, I have a couple questions here, both from in the room and on Zoom, about nuclear waste. So Robert, this is your department. So what's currently being done with current waste product, and then sort of what's the plan for future nuclear waste product?
Yeah, there's a couple, couple ways to answer this, and let me answer the facts on what we have today. The back when nuclear plants were being built back in the 70s, the government committed to take any of the used nuclear fuel back and set up a repository in the country. I think, somebody like a Harry Reid got an airport named after himself to block that from the state of Nevada, and it doesn't exist right now. So any of the spent fuel that we have from any of the nuclear sites go into dry cask storage containers, and they're located on our site. So all the fuel that we've ever burnt, as we call it, burnt since the 70s, is sitting on our site. If you took all the nuclear fuel that we've ever used in the country and stacked all the dry cask storage containers up, it would be the size of a football field, about 3 stories tall. So relatively small footprint as far as how much nuclear waste we're talking about. The second piece on where are we heading, other countries reprocess their nuclear fuel. The reprocessing is important because about 40 to 60% of the uranium is still in the nuclear fuel and can be used again. But back in the about late 70s again, it was, I believe, Nixon signed a bill saying we're not going to reprocess fuel in this country. One of the byproducts is plutonium. Plutonium, as many of us know, are in nuclear bombs. So because of that, they said, hey, we don't want private industry being able to handle plutonium. So we have a moratorium. One of the executive orders that came out of the current administration is taking a look at reprocessing nuclear fuel, because if we can do that, we can recycle the fuel that we currently have, that football field worth of used fuel, and be able to make it into new fuel rods of both uranium and plutonium to be able to burn in current nuclear plants. So optimistic about that. It's not happened yet, but as an industry, we're ready.
Thank you. I appreciate the commentary about the supply constraints and the generation opportunities, the lead times and all of that. I'd like to hear a little bit more, maybe help us understand on the grid infrastructure side, capacity. and our ability to modernize it and achieve concurrency with the development of the generation, because this is just a small view from where I sit, but I'm seeing redlined pockets in the coastal area for solar installations. There are pockets where people can't put them up at this point in time. And I'm a little confused as to whether this is a grid capacity issue and how far behind are we on infrastructure? What's the lead time for that modernization? And how do we achieve concurrency with building the generation facilities?
So the red lines that you see, specifically for Delmarva, it looks a little different for the co-op. That's the circuits or feeders that just can't take any more without needed upgrades. We did a value of solar study. It was the first one that's been done in the country in like the last 8 years. It's been used nationally. It's actually been used internationally. In addition to that, we were asked by the legislature to do an energy storage study. We're getting ready to announce those results in the next couple of months. Energy storage can help there. I think there's also, and we've talked about this at the energy stakeholders call, I think there's other grid enhancing technologies that we can use. One of the challenges in my former role is any new technology that the utility uses, you have to pay for, and if that new technology fails, you also have to pay to replace it. And so trying to use technology that we already have. I am a huge proponent of virtual power plants. I really want to see, and I think we're going to get it. I really want to see like individual homeowners have batteries, but I don't just want you to have batteries because that's just generation, right? And that can help your home, but honestly, it doesn't do anything for me. So I need the utility to have direct load control over your batteries, which also potentially could allow me to bid it into the PJM market. But I want the virtual power plant. And, in the future, if we were ever to talk about doing grants or rebates for residential solar, we have to know that there's direct load control from the utility. The 3 projects that I've mentioned that we're doing with utilities, one is an ownership model, one is a power purchase agreement, both of which will help with peak load shaving and solar saturation, amongst other things. And I'm hoping that the third, which is a Delmarva proposal before the Public Service Commission, would do a virtual power plant. And I really think that can help the grid. There's also other measures that may not be that expensive, but we just haven't used. I've pushed this for a long time. We haven't used non-wire alternatives to the maximum extent practicable. And I think we need to look at that as well as look at virtual power plants.
One question from Barbara online, which hasn't been brought up yet. What's the status or is geothermal a reasonable energy product for Delaware?
Our green energy program, which has funded a lot of those 10,000 solar installations, also provides funding, and there are brochures over here on the side, provides funding for geothermal, which just is, people are not turning to that in Delaware anywhere near the level that we're seeing solar. But if you're interested, call us.
Question for Mr. DeKnight. You made your company has a great track record for building and operating the Salem and the Hope Creek plants. Given the well-known time to build, license a nuclear plant, you have a site that you could possibly put some small SMRs. Is that under consideration for your site?
So,
Just tie in.
yeah, good question. Don't want to make a pitch for my site right now, but it's going to sound like it here in a second. There are 6 early site permits that exist currently in the country. We happen to be one of those 6 early site permits. And early site permits, the first licensing path that you need to go to be able to develop a nuclear reactor. Following that, there's a different licensing process to enter into a construction permit to be able to do that. Here's what I'll tell you, and this is the trick. And I talked about it's going to take a team effort to be able to build new nuclear, whether it's in New Jersey, Georgia, or Texas. Upstate New York is becoming a player as well. Our company has a market cap. Like if we take a look at our CapEx, it's about $42 billion. And, when you think about one of the 2-pack, if we went out and built 2 AP1000s, it's right around $25 billion. So well over half of the market cap of our company. The day that we announced that, the bond ratings associated with our debt would go from, B++. And if my CFO is listening right now, I apologize for not knowing what our bond rating is. But it would go directly down into junk bonds, the day that we announced it. So there needs to be back-end risk management associated with building a nuclear power plant. You need somebody for an offtake, whether it's somebody like a state that says, hey, we'll purchase the power at a certain rate, make it feel more like deregulated. You talked about data centers, the Metas, Googles, and OpenAI, Amazon. A lot of the announcements of new nuclear are coming from them, and they're helping the back-end risk associated with a new build, as well as Department of Energy funding. So all of those things would need to come together to be able to say, okay, we're going to go build on one of the existing early site permits or a greenfield type build somewhere else in the country. That takes time and a lot of coordination. And all those things are in considerment, I'll say with most of the major utilities as well as, players. This is being recorded, right? So I can't tell you anything beyond that.
Good luck with all that.
So I'm thinking globally, but want to act locally, and we have a cap on how much capacity we have and what we can buy. And my local side of that is the overbuilding of communities here in this local area, as well as large shopping centers that we're now talking about. And I guess I'm asking everybody, currently what we're more worried about is traffic and the cost per person of traffic and the safety of all of that going around. But should we also be worrying about when we build these great big communities as well as these big shopping centers, what the impact of those communities are on our grid as well? And if there is, how do we quantify a number that we add to that environmental impact and the impact to the citizens that are already here that then get to pay more for our electricity because that new community of 900 homes is getting built? And tell me if I need to go fly a kite, if what I'm talking about doesn't matter at all.
You guys.
You saw a chart here that showed that load growth, demand for electricity here and in the region has been relatively flat for years. And that's while you've been seeing the shopping centers and housing developments go up, because compared to a hyperscale data center, it's like it's incremental. And so that's what's driving us into having to take into the situation we're in. So it's just a matter of scale.
If I can add one thing, from a rate design perspective, you want load growth, right? So you actually want to have more people that you can spread the cost around. The difficulty is that the generation side, right? Being able to power all of that.
I've got a follow on from that. You want load growth, but the quality of that load growth, of that demand, is important. If you can add customers, if you can sell more kilowatt hours without having to build more infrastructure, then that's good. That infrastructure has more customers paying for it. One of the difficulties is when you have growth that shoots us way past where we are now and adds to the peaks. If you look at load today, or just about any day, you've got a peak in the morning, you've got a valley in the middle of the day, and you've got a peak again in the evening, and another valley even lower overnight. Now, if you can fill those valleys with demand for kilowatt hours, you're not having to build more infrastructure, more power plants, power lines to meet that need. This is why, for instance, it makes sense to charge EVs overnight. So it's a little bit more nuanced, but one final thought. A large load customer that wants to come in and require uninterruptible load every hour of every day is a much bigger challenge than somebody who comes in and says, like a standard industrial customer, who's going to run maybe a couple of shifts a day, and they can manage their load and fit it in with the infrastructure that we have already, if that makes sense.
My question is to Mr. Denight. It actually is two parts now, based on your comments. The first part
only get one.
Okay, I'll use
right,
an and. Okay.
Good.
So the source of your information in your presentation, only the last page for the costs had attribution. One was like MIT. I just happened to see that. I didn't know what the second one was off the top of my head. So I'm assuming that's all in-house data that you've generated for your presentation?
But most of the data that I have up there is going to be public information that you can pull from external resources.
Okay, and then, so this is part of that question that since you were talking about spent fuel rods, what's the contamination area and concern to public safety for those types?
As far as used fuel or?
Yes. Spent fuel that's contained on site. You're saying it's all contained on your sites?
It is.
Every nuclear site in the country, so the government didn't keep any of it, like?
No. So all of it's in sealed containers in concrete casts. And those concrete casts are very robust, is what I could tell you. The design of them can withstand an aircraft hit or a locomotive hit. Earthquake, certainly. They've been in areas where an earthquake has happened and they really haven't moved. But they're air cooled, so they're in a very safe and stable condition right now. There's always some amount of heat associated with the spent fuel rods, and that's why it needs to be air cooled outside. So they're in a concrete pad that's designed for a seismic event, and And containers are designed for one as well.
If I could just jump, I mean, you guys are the experts, and I'm new to the energy field, but one thing I've learned that I think is useful when thinking about new energy infrastructure is thinking about it in terms of trade-offs, and that every decision has benefits and costs. Again, it's not my role to say which choices are better, but whether you're building an offshore wind farm, a new advanced nuclear reactor, solar, each of those has benefits and costs. And from the social science perspective, it's important to involve, community members in that decision making, which Tom has emphasized. So I guess I just kind of wanted to emphasize that. And Robert serves on the Nuclear Energy Feasibility Task Force that Delaware is hosting right now. So I thought it was helpful to have that industry perspective.
Yep. Thank you.
So 2 questions that stem off of what you just said, Catherine, is what's the status of the Nuclear Task Force, and when will that report be available and decisions made?
Yeah, so the 5th meeting is coming up this upcoming Monday. A final report is due to Governor Meyer by the end of July. And the charge of the task force is to examine the feasibility and come up with this final report that talks about the different benefits and costs of deploying specifically small modular reactors. And maybe I'll ask Robert and the others a question about that in just a minute. Again, so there's not necessarily any legislative mandates that are going to come out of that, but it's rather a list of recommendations and a compilation of all the expertise on the task force. There might be more questions, but I kind of want to ask a big summary question, and we can get to the other ones too. We've talked about kind of the current generation ability in Delaware. We've talked about community solar. We have one wind turbine, which is on the UD campus in the whole state. Offshore wind, which doesn't exist yet, but might in the future. My big question is, what can Delaware do right now in terms of from the state side, from the efficiency side, and from the industry side? How do each of your perspectives take on this challenge of meeting Delaware's energy needs looking forward?
Well, there's a longer term perspective. As has been said, new gas generation takes about 5 to 7 years if you start it today, and that's for the plant itself. You need to plug it into something, so that may add to the complexity. Offshore wind, we have U.S. wind is underway, and nuclear is, in terms of time, is perhaps the most challenging because we don't have much recent experience to work from. But we've already talked about some of the things that we can do in the nearer term. We have maybe 150, 200 megawatts of solar that people are developing here in Delaware. And now 200 megawatts of solar is 2/3 of the Calpine natural gas plant in Dover. Now it won't have the same capacity factor, but it's real. Now you start combining that with batteries, which battery storage or virtual power plant, these are solutions that are being put in place across the country right now. In Maryland, for instance, we visited some of these last year. And anything any energy consumer can do, not just to put solar panels, but to improve the efficiency of your home or your business, or to put in place demand response measures, can also benefit the individual customer and the state as a whole. And demand response is one phrase. Another way of referring to it is dispatchable load. The virtual power plants that Drew was talking about, if somebody in a control room says, the grid needs a couple of megawatts right now, and all across the state and in the region, there are dispatchable load control mechanisms or technologies in place, then instead of going up to 140 gigawatts in PJM, all of a sudden we're coming in a little under that and a little under that. It's incremental, but those are things that solar, energy efficiency, storage, and virtual power plants are things that the state as a whole and individual customers, business, or households can put in place right now. And Drew can tell you more about that.
So we have a program called Home Energy Checkup and Counseling. It doesn't cost you anything. There is the Delmarva Power Customer Relief Fund and the Delaware Energy Fund that was set up by the legislature. In the last, so let's see, since from August to January, we estimate that we saved customers about $3.66 million through energy efficiency. That's it. It's a 1 hour visit, $240 of direct install measures. So like trying to explain the power of energy efficiency because it's not sexy. On the energy storage study, I'll give you a little bit of insight on where we are right now. We think it's about 65% front of the meter versus 35% behind the meter, where in front of the meter means it doesn't have to be connected to anything. So that is interesting. It's promising. And then one more plug on energy efficiency. Tomorrow we have a ribbon cutting at 11 o'clock for Delaware's first passive houses, which is the highest energy efficiency certification in the world. Showing, models and examples of what, an energy efficient home can be. And even the fact that your current home can be more efficient and you can have demand response. So when it was really cold, I'm a co-op member. They called on my thermostat and changed my thermostat because I gave them direct load control. Those are all levers that we can use that don't actually cost us anything. In addition to like generation, we have to look at consumption and trying to lower that too.
Robert, any final thoughts? We're about to wrap up here.
Yeah, I would just say from a utility or supplier standpoint, the biggest benefit that we can have is an all the above strategy. So whether that's solar and wind, and try to start moving forward with that. I talked a little bit about nuclear plants. The Salem Unit 1 license expires in 11 years. So if it takes 10 years to go build a nuclear plant, if we're not starting today, think where we're going to be at in 10 years. Right, that's 40% of the electricity being supplied to New Jersey that also imports another 4 gigawatts of power. So you have to think long term as well. And if we're not thinking long term, we're gonna build natural gas plants. Right, Department of Commerce just made the announcement yesterday: $33 billion in natural gas plants in Ohio for 9 gigawatts of power. And if we build a lot of natural gas plants, our fuel diversity now is about natural gas. And if natural gas becomes a crisis, it's an energy crisis for us. That's why it would be better if we have natural gas plants, we have baseload nuclear plants, and then we're augmenting with stored energy, wind, solar, and then making sure that we have a robust grid. Right? We talked a little bit about the robustness of the grid. The last piece that I'll say about data centers is it takes about 2 to 3 years to build a data center as well. So there's been a lot of announcements, a lot of paper reactors, PowerPoint reactors, as I call them, being announced in the newspapers as well. But all that's like 2 years away. So we got to be thinking about that. And if that 1 gigawatt data center was built in Delaware and we had power to be able to supply it, you know, that people that live in Delaware can work at those power plants, great, because there's only one transmission and distribution system. And as Drew mentioned, if you have somebody coming in and taking another 1 gigawatt of power on a 2 gigawatt grid, your transmission distribution cost individually just went down by that third. Right, so that's the benefit of having a large load like that. That's what Drew was talking about on, hey, transmission and distribution costs would actually go down. So think long term, get a good energy policy, stick with it, and then let's make sure that we have the right power plants, solar, wind, in existence here 10 years from now as well as next year.
Please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you so much for your time and offering your expertise. And I also want to thank everyone who joined both in person and online. If you still have questions that we weren't able to get to, please reach out to me. If I can't answer it, I will find someone who will, perhaps our panelists if they're willing. Yeah, please reach out with any questions. Thank you so much, and thank you to the Lewes Library for co-hosting this event.